Get ready to pay more for higher education. The changes to student population that may have prompted a tuition hike at Cal State campuses.
Most people outside of the black community here in San Diego did not want any interaction with the people in the inner cities, the people in Southeast San Diego, the people in Logan Heights.
Paying the price for segregated neighborhoods, we take a look at the history of San Diego's Black Panther Party.
One thing that my mom has said often to anyone who will listen when any discussion about being a refugee comes up is that nobody wants to be a refugee.
The lessons learned from a woman who survived a war zone and made a life for herself in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Tuition will go up next year at San Diego State and Cal State San Marcos. Today, California State University trustees approved their first tuition increase since 2011. It will go up by $270 a year, meaning annual tuition will be just more than $5,700. The trustees say enrollment is growing and the increase is needed to hire more faculty and add more classes. They also say state funding is insufficient. Students were on hand to protest the tuition increase, saying they already face too much student debt. CSU officials say 60% of students get grants or waivers to cover the full cost of tuition. Secretary of Defense James Mattis was on Capitol Hill today to ask for $30 billion. The funds would go toward deferred maintenance and training. KPBS reporter Steve Walsh takes a look at the proposal in this report.
The money would be on top of the Trump administration's next two-year budget. Secretary Mattis told Congress that mandatory budget caps force the Pentagon to fund overseas operations with money normally set aside for repairs and maintenance,
including the $30 billion request for additional appropriations for FY 2017, to get our aircraft back in the air, our ships back to sea, and our troops back in the field with refurbished or new equipment and proper training. We based this request on a realistic appreciation of the capacity we need to fight and win on the battlefield.
The biggest needs are spare parts and ammunition. Mattis said he wants to lift the mandatory congressional budget caps that avoided a government shutdown during the Obama administration. Asked about the impact of the Trump hiring freeze, Mattis said he is allowing the Defense Department to fill a number of civilian positions.
In order to keep shipyard workers, airport aircraft depot workers on the job, everything right down to daycare workers so that our troops can drop their kids off and be at work on time.
The Pentagon is asking for an extra $25 billion through the end of fiscal 2017 and another $5 million to fund the operations against ISIS. The administration's actual plan to combat ISIS isn't expected until May. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
New analysis puts the price tag of the Republican healthcare overhaul in the billions for California. Governor Brown's administration released the figures today. If the new bill in Congress passes, it could cost the state $4.3 billion in 2020 and nearly $19 billion in the next decade. That's unless California cuts healthcare benefits. The U.S. House is scheduled to vote on the bill tomorrow. San Diego educators made a pledge today to protect immigrant students. Leaders from 4 districts say they're pushing back against the Trump administration's order to cut federal funding to sanctuary jurisdictions. San Diego Unified, Sweetwater Union, Southwestern Community College, and the San Diego Community College districts signed an amicus brief.
The federal government is attempting to force local governments, including local education institutions, to become an arm in their attempt to round up, detain, and deport people in our communities. And we have made it very clear to the federal government that we refuse to participate.
Santa Clara County and the city of San Francisco have filed lawsuits to block the implementation of the sanctuary executive order. So far, 25 school districts have filed friend of the court briefs. The new administration is weighing a big decision, how to vet refugees. But for those fleeing their homes, the journey to safety begins well ahead of the screening process. During the Bosnian War in the 1990s, 1 million people were reportedly displaced, including a child named Sinka, who is now a biotech executive living in San Diego. She asked that we only use her first name because of privacy concerns.
I was 6 years old when my family left Bosnia. This was in 1992. Before we left Sarajevo, there was still a lot of, bad stuff happening, snipers and so on shooting at the city, so we stayed inside.
For more than 2 months now, Sarajevo has been under siege.
And one of the most poignant memories from my childhood there, because I was only 6 years old, so I don't remember that much, luckily, fortunately I would say, was playing with my Barbie dolls with my cousin who's my age in my grandma's bathroom. So for me, the memory right before we left Bosnia was incredibly positive. This was on our balcony back at home. We left on a bus with a number of other refugee families. The bus was pulled over by some army. And all of the men were ordered to get off. So I was with my dad, my mom, and my brother. And so all of the men started started saying goodbye to their families and had to get off the bus. I thought, that was the last time I was going to see my dad. However, the bus driver said that for his long journey, he is required to have someone to switch off with. And so he said that my dad was the other bus driver and that they had to take turns. So my dad was the only man who got to stay on the bus, which I think is hard for him too. But my family stayed as a unit. We eventually made it down to northern Germany. There's this guy, and again, this is another theme in my life. There's always somebody who you consider an angel on earth, and he took us in to his home, into a room in his house, and until we were able to sort of get set up. But getting set up is, I guess, a relative term. We were safe, but like all of the other Bosnian refugees, we were on a temporary visa. So every 3 months, my family had to go to the courthouse or some other government entity to see whether they could get another 3-month visa. But then came that day, and we knew that day was going to come, that we were not going to get that visa. So my family had actually started applying for asylum or seeking refugee status in other countries. We ended up actually in Tennessee. In a small town. We had some cousins there. This was the first time I woke up in my American bed. I think, and I say this a lot too, I really do consider myself one of the luckiest people on earth, because I feel like my story scratches the surface of some of the horrific stories of children that I work with now, and other children from Bosnia as well. C-A-N. Oh, I should tell you the word, and you have to write it. Okay. I now tutor at San Diego Refugee Tutoring, which is an organization that I've fallen in love with very quickly. And I tutor different children every week. There's one kid, Maria from Syria, Tess, who I've really connected with. The book. See? The hair. Maria is incredibly excited about everything.
I like it dance.
Okay, how do you like to dance? But she's lacking the ability to express herself in English. And I remember that frustration as a kid, both in Germany and in the U.S. It's the easiest one. One thing that my mom has said often to anyone who will listen when any discussion about being a refugee comes up is that nobody wants to be a refugee.
That's really, really exciting.
If you meet a refugee who just got here on day one, just know that they'd also rather have a home that isn't here. And that's not to say that they're not happy and incredibly grateful to be here, as my family has been. It's to know that this is it for them. This is the best choice that they are able to make given the circumstances in their own motherland. Thank you. You're very nice.
That was Senka, a former refugee from Bosnia. She left with her family in 1992. That piece was produced by KPBS reporter Taryn Minto. A knife-wielding man went on a deadly rampage today at the heart of Britain's seat of power. Lawmakers and visitors were on lockdown after the man was shot by police. 5 people died, at least 20 others wounded. We'll have more on the investigation tonight on PBS NewsHour. That starts at 7 right here on KPBS. Proposed changes from the Trump administration would affect efforts to help people find affordable housing in San Diego. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John says they may hurt the lowest income renters, but help middle-class families.
The proposed federal budget would reduce funding for HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, by $6 billion, or 13%. Now, those cuts would reduce the number of Section 8 housing vouchers for low-income renters, the disabled, and the elderly. For many of those currently living on the streets or in their cars, a housing voucher is the only hope of being able to afford a place to live. Currently, San Diego County and 4 cities, Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside, and National City, have housing voucher programs, and all of them have waiting lists of several years. About 11,000 people rely on the county vouchers for rental assistance. But Stephen Russell of San Diego's Housing Federation says changes in the tax code could make the biggest increase in history to low-income housing tax credits. Those are what encourage investors to invest in affordable housing.
In a time when budget cuts are striking subsidies that are available to help the poorest of the poor, there is a proposal here in the tax code to actually expand that tax credit and help more Americans.
Russell says the change may allow affordable housing financed with tax credits to be rented to people with slightly higher incomes, up to 80% of the area median income, instead of only 60%. For a family of 4, that's about $60,000, so it would open the door for working middle-class families to qualify for affordable housing. Allison St. John, KPBS News.
Voters may help decide the fate of the San Diego Convention Center. Mayor Kevin Faulconer's office says there's a plan to submit a ballot measure. It would help fund a convention center expansion. The plan calls for raising the hotel room tax to 3%. The project is expected to cost nearly $7 million. San Diego's dialysis centers are getting higher marks from federal quality assessments. Cheryl Clark with our media partner iNewsSource explains what's behind the improvement.
Since the start of a federal quality rating program for dialysis centers several years ago, patient mortality rates and other quality scores have gotten better in San Diego. Dr. Danuta Shabinska heads the dialysis unit at UCSD Medical Center. Since 2015, the center went from 3 stars to 5 stars.
It would be nice to say that we do a better job taking care of our patients, and I think we do.
The STAR system measures outcomes like rate of transfusions, patient hospitalization, and mortality.
In our dialysis unit, it's about 11% of patients who start dialysis on January 1st who are not going to be alive at the end of this particular year.
That's average compared to national data, but there are outliers like Steve Brown, who has been on dialysis for 9 years. He travels to UCSD in Hillcrest 3 times a week from his home in Ocean Beach.
I asked him what would happen if I just quit coming to dialysis, just stopped. And he said you would probably be dead within 2 weeks. He said about 2 weeks and you'd probably die.
Although doctors and nurses agree the rating system isn't perfect, Wendy Lester, the unit's nurse manager, says transparency plays an important role.
I think it's held us more accountable to people who are paying for this care to make sure that we are doing the right thing.
I'm Cheryl Clark with KPBS media partner iNewsSource.
For the full story and more about patient experiences in dialysis in San Diego, visit inewssource.org. And to clarify the convention center story, the project is expected to cost nearly $700 million. A new survey reveals most people think America is not well prepared to take care of its seniors. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the survey offers a glimpse of Americans' fears about aging.
The survey comes from the La Jolla-based West Health Institute. More than 3,000 adults 30 and older took part. Most respondents said losing one's memory, developing health problems, and not having financial security were their biggest concerns about getting older. Dr. Zia Aga is the Institute's chief medical officer. He says a majority of those surveyed think we're not doing the right things to address these issues.
It tells us that we need to think differently and act differently if we are going to be able to address the needs of this population.
The survey also showed that for most people, signs of old age include when a person can no longer live independently or can no longer do anything to improve their health. Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
You might have a slick commute tonight with thunderstorms hitting San Diego. Shanae Shocker has the forecast.
The wet weather continues to roll in across areas of really much of California, all the way from the north down into central California, where we're seeing the biggest bulk of that wet weather here just south of San Francisco into the Fresno area. We've even been seeing some of that rain reach into Los Angeles. You can see some of this green begin to pop up around San Diego as well. That's because we've been seeing some clouds and some rain and windier conditions moving in to tonight. That will continue the past 6 hours here. Showers have really begun, and throughout tonight, thunder shower going to continue to be a possibility as well. 57 degrees for our low. Will stay pretty mild for our overnight lows, but we see the chances of those thunder showers all the way out towards the mountains here. Mount Laguna, 33 degrees. Thunder shower in store for us as a potential. Borrego Springs, however, more so looking at just showers here. Wet weather, not expecting any of that lightning or thunder to reach the other side of these mountains. Into our Thursday, cooler conditions. Area of high pressure is going to begin to build off the coast. A lot of that wet weather heads into the areas of the Four Quarters, so we'll be calming down, but it's going to remain unsettled throughout this evening and into tomorrow morning. So we're looking at showers right around the 7 o'clock tonight, and then this is going to continue as we head into this evening. Around 10 o'clock, you'll start to see those showers really pick up, and also the chances of those thunder showers extend here. As we head into Thursday morning, however, by 7 o'clock, we should be mostly clear, though we are looking at some cloudy conditions. Late in the week, that wet weather held off towards our north, but still going to be affecting much of the Pacific Northwest, central and into northern California. But that jet stream not dipping far enough south that it's going to pull any of that wet weather here. We're just looking at some warming conditions as well as some windier conditions. Taking a look at the coast for your Thursday, 64 for your high. We'll stay in those mid-60s throughout the rest of the week. We're clearing out once again. Much of that rainfall going to be held into tonight, into the early hours of tomorrow morning. Otherwise, it looks mostly sunny for your weekend. Pretty nice weather around. We do see the chance of a shower or so here on your Saturday as a very weak system passes through. So a little bit cloudier there. Mostly sunny skies for Sunday here inland. Out towards the mountains, well, this is where we start to see some pretty windy conditions for us this afternoon into tonight, Thursday morning as well. Possibility of a morning shower. Temps are going to warm up back into the 50s, though, with mostly sunny skies. Last but not least, well, the deserts, we're back into the 80s for our Friday, and then we'll head there more steadily as we head towards early next week. For KPBS News, I'm Shanae Shocker.
San Diego State University was the birthplace for the local Black Panther Party 50 years ago, but the party was actually conceived several miles south, where most of the city's African-American population lived. In the first of two parts, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma looks at the party that helped the rising Black Power movement.
1967 was a vibrant time inside Black neighborhoods across the country, including California.
The West Coast was also very active and very into the culture of the time in the 60s, and with the coming out with new types of music and new types of dress.
Chanel Price was a 17-year-old San Diego State University student at the time who had grown up in southeast San Diego.
It was a very upbeat, robust society in the black community.
Former San Diego police officer Terry Morris recalls the city as both a military town and a happy-go-lucky place with aspirations.
He wanted to have the fancy marinas, and he wanted to have the fancy places to go eat, and he wanted to have Hollywood stars vacationing in San Diego. They were kind of a wannabe LA.
But like most other cities across the country, communities were segregated along racial lines.
Most people outside of the black community here in San Diego did not want any interaction with the people in the inner cities, the people in southeast San Diego, the people in Logan Heights.
If a minority strayed past the understood geographic boundaries, he says there were consequences.
You were stopped by the police, harassed by the police, etc. Get out of here, go back where you came from, etc.
Inside the community, Price describes interactions between police and blacks as fraught.
If we were accosted by the San Diego Police Department for whatever reason, pick one, we are usually taken down by Father Joe's at the lumber yards, and we were brutalized. We were beaten or talked down to or cussed out.
Former San Diego Police Lieutenant Richard Bennett was a rookie officer then. He says distrust flowed both ways.
At night, we'd pull a car over that had windows that were tinted so darkly we couldn't even see who was inside. And we often wondered, if there were going to be guns pointed at us.
Bennett believes police tactics played a role in the distrust.
Today, we would ask you, and then we would tell you, and then we would make you. But in those days, it was like we arrived and we told you. And people resented that, and I can understand why.
It's against this backdrop that the San Diego Black Panther Party was formed.
I was immediately attracted to it because it allowed me an opportunity to help the black community.
He says police brutality was not the sole reason for opening a local chapter.
We were also suffering from a lot of social, economic, and political inequalities.
Price says the local Black Panthers provided meals for the elderly, opened health clinics, and served food to the homeless. And they started a breakfast program for children.
They had a blueprint for success for black people, which I thought was a positive thing. But that's not how they interacted with the police.
Bennett says Panther rhetoric made the party the poster child for militancy.
And they'd stand around in their Black Panther berets with their rifles. They drew cartoons of policemen being pigs and being shot by a black person. I was threatened by that.
In July 1969, there was a riot at Mountain View Park. Panther Party Chairman Henry Wallace blames police for the chaos.
And they knew that most of the black people in southeast San Diego would go to that park on Sundays. And they used that to set off a riot. They started that themselves. They came in there like National Guards and stuff and started firing tear gas at people and God knows what else.
Retired criminal defense lawyer Richard Savitz represented local Panthers in court.
The police would arrest them for resisting arrest or disturbing the peace or something as a punishment for being Black Panthers. There was just no understanding between the police and the Black Panthers.
But retired officer Terry Morris believes he connected with the Panther during a house raid where he says 4 group members were living with a white prostitute. He recalls telling the Panther he believed others were trying to start a racial war. Here's what he says he told the man.
I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want you to hurt me. I reminded him that in the time he had known me, he'd never seen me hit anybody other than social backtalk between Panthers and us.
Another memory he can't shake is the feeling he got early one Sunday morning as he was closing out his graveyard shift. He was driving down Imperial Avenue from 32nd Street to 25th back to the station.
The first thing I noticed was the smell of barbecues being started. Because I had the windows down, I noticed the sound of choirs warming up. And it was just a real good feeling.
That feeling wasn't shared by everyone. A series of FBI and police raids ultimately weakened the party. That was then. This is now. The San Diego Black Panther Party is reuniting. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Michael Brown, you got a name too. Philando Castile, we got a name too. Alton Sterling, you got a name too. Corin Gaines, you got a name too. Pray to God that we'll never name you. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing today?
Hip-hop artist Jasiri X was at San Diego City College today talking about activism. It was part of the school's 3rd annual Social Justice and Education Conference. He told students he got pushback from record labels when he began writing songs about politics.
A lot of times when you do socially conscious or intelligent music, you're told off top like, oh, that's not going to sell.
Right.
And really what it is like, we're not going to market that. You know, they kind of have this idea on what's marketable, and it's really these stereotypes that they feel comfortable with.
Other speakers at the conference spoke about how to work with issues like climate change, immigration, and racial justice. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.